The first thing you should know is silence out here isn't peaceful. It's just empty like a space carved out of your chest where something important used to live. I woke one morning to the same dry wind and the same busted kettle whistling too long on the stove, my boots freezing on the floorboards. No reason to get up but habit. No one left to care if I didn't. Sometimes I think the ranch itself remembers better days, when the land was called promise and laughter rolled through these fence lines. But these days, it's just me, a coffee tin full of dust, and a ribbon black as midnight hanging by the door, the only thing left of Eliza and our baby. Yeah, life will do that to you out here, burn you clean, and leave only what's stubborn enough to stick around. It had been years since I set foot in a church, or let myself even look at the barn without a lump forming in my throat bury my girls behind it, beneath that old pecan tree that never gave fruit again. And since then, while I fed the animals like a ghost, nailed up rails with hands that used to make music, and cleaned my rifle with more care than I ever gave my own heart. There were wolves out in those hills, and worse things than wolves, but I'm mostly kept to myself, letting the wind rattle the boards and the kettle scream like a woman crying, just so I could pretend the place was still alive. It was one of those blue dusk evenings when I first saw them 7 shadows walking down from the ridge, slow and quiet, barefoot, wrapped in old hides. I could feel the air tighten, like the land itself was holding its breath. 7 young Comanche women, none older than 25, each with eyes that had seen too much but didn't flinch, didn't ask for pity. The lead girl, her chin lifted, voice low but clear as bell, "We need no fire, only a roof." There was something in her eyes that didn't beg, didn't back down. I didn't say a word, just opened the barn and left the door swinging, a kind of silent welcome, I guess. That night, I heard singing drifting on the wind low, mournful, not a language I understood, but it made the whole ranch feel different, less hollow. First music I'd heard since my girls passed. The next day, a basket of berries on my porch, a carbone bird gifts, maybe, or payment. The barn was swept, the fence mended, the donkey tied up with a new lead. I started finding bitter roots in my kettle, logs split clean in the woodpile, little signs they were settling in, taking care. I said nothing, and they said nothing to me, just worked like they were stitching themselves into the place one quiet act at a time. At night, the singing returned, softer, sweeter, aching with some kind of longing that made my chest tighten. Then the 5th morning, hoofbeats shook the ground, first a few, then too many to count. I stepped out and saw them, hundreds of Comanche riders, painted, armed, spreading across the ridge like a storm. The 7 girls stood alone in the corral, back straight, not moving. One of them, tall, shoulders squared, just looked at me waiting, not pleading. I stood beside them. It felt right. A drumbeat began, low and steady, like the land itself was keeping time. The riders circled wide, but didn't charge, didn't shout. The oldest, with a scar on his lip tall, elk rode forward. The lead girl, her voice as sharp as winter, called his name. What followed wasn't a fight, not at first. They spoke about shame and silence, about sisters sold for powder and coin, about dead girls no one had buried right. I couldn't catch every word, but I didn't need to. The hurt in the air was thick as snow. I stepped forward, slow and limping, told Tall Elk, I gave them a roof. They gave me peace. He warned I'd bring blood. I told him, not if you don't. A silence heavier than steel followed. Then slowly, some riders dismounted, forming a line not for war, but something closer to mourning. A boy broke down, confessed to a younger girl his sister, I think. The pain between them was louder than any gun. That night, there was no singing, no fires, just waiting. The girls move around the ranch, fixing what needed fixing, cooking, planting. Their presence was quiet but strong, like weather you learn to live with. A few days later, a woman came older, lined face, called herself their mother. She and I, Santa, the sharp-eyed girl, sat side by side in the cold, not speaking much, just sharing space. You could feel years of pain in the gap between them, a whole story that would never be said out loud. Later, Santa stood by the graves behind my barn. She didn't ask forgiveness, she whispered. I told her, sometimes people show up when the words are too late. She just nodded. We tied her braid and my daughter's ribbon together, not a ceremony, just a small truth in a world too full of lies. The riders stayed on the ridge, camped in the snow, waiting for something to break, maybe, or just for the wind to shift. The girls kept working, kept singing less mournful now, more like remembering. Some nights, Isana would sit at the fire pit, hands trembling but jaw set, staring into the flames like she could see all the future she'd lost. We didn't speak of what might come. Then one morning, a letter came, left by the bread. Town folks talking, sheriff worried, threats of a ride out to save the women, drive them off my land. No signature, just that icy warning only cowards and bureaucrats can deliver. I didn't tell the girls, just watch them paint flowers on the porch, hang curtains, make the place feel alive again. They weren't just hiding. They were settling, and that made people angry. Night fell. I cleaned my Henry, slow and careful, feeling the weight of every choice. The sheriff arrived just before midnight from men with guns and cold eyes. He called me out, told me folks were uncomfortable, wanted the girls gone for safety. I told him, they're not property. He tried to soften it, but his hands never left his holster. The girls came out, not with weapons, but with bread and carvings, standing together in the moonlight. The sheriff pressed. I stood my ground, rifle on my side. The tension felt like a drawn wire ready to snap. From the trees, the Comanche riders emerged again, tall elk at their head, no war paint, just presence. He stood by me, said they were here to make sure nothing burned, no harm done. For a moment, you could feel history holding its breath. The sheriff sized up the odds, the moon staring down, then spat and turned his horse. They left without a fight. When the dust settled, the girls returned to the porch, heads high, and I stood in the yard under that pale moon, feeling something Newa, kind of peace, maybe, or just the absence of fear. The next morning, the peach pit they planted had sprouted. 7 pairs of shoes by the door. My house was full for the first time in years. You know, there's no neat ending to stories like this. The world doesn't give you clean victories or pure justice. Just moments, small as a feather tied to your fence, where you can choose to stand or turn away. Maybe that's enough. Maybe that's all there ever was, just the chance to do right by those who come to your door, to sit beside pain instead of running from it, to plant something that might one day bloom. So tell me, what would you have done, standing in my boots on that cold, silent land? Where's the line between shelter and risk, between standing your ground and starting a war? Comment bilo? Let's talk about what justice, home, encourage mean, because out here, sometimes all you have is the story you're willing to tell.
Đây là những công việc của mình, là mình lên mạng xã hội tìm hiểu những video.
Vamos supor, você falou negócio sério. It is cold, yeah. Next one? Alright. Thank you, man. Hey, if you guys have any trouble, let somebody know. Please.
After the tree to hold on to. Yeah.
Yeah, they're